Welcome back to the program. My name is George Knapp. My guest is Robert Greenwald, a producer and director who started out his career doing mainstream entertainment, TV shows, movies, but moved into documentary production some years ago and has won all kinds of accolades and awards, including a Peabody Award, the Robert Wood Johnson Award, 25 Emmy nominations, Golden Globe nominations, and has probably ticked off untold numbers of dozens of people in government and positions of power. Robert, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Man, I saw the film today. Powerful, moving, also infuriating, and more than a little bit scary. I mean, you know, you've got some of these whistleblowers who you profile who they all paid a price, of course. Some of them sort of won, but still, it's not encouraging at all to see what happened to them.
Well, we want to tell the story. We want to put a bright light on the problem. We also want to be realistic and say these people, to their eternal credit as patriots, as people who believe in democracy, spoke up because they refused to remain silent. And yes, they in fact did pay a price for it, but that they put a country above comfort.
You know, it seems like everything we talk about these days is viewed through the prism of left and right. This should be an issue that left and right could agree on. Republicans, Democrats, it seems like everybody should agree that this is outrageous, the kind of stuff that happened to these whistleblowers, and the larger picture of the emergence of this national security state. Why do you suppose more people are not engaged? Why are we just sort of hunkering down and hoping it happens to somebody else?
Well, I think it's a really interesting question, and I think there's a couple of parts to that answer. One is it doesn't affect us right in front of our faces. If we walk out the door and a bus hits us, we know we need a traffic light so the bus won't hit us again. The national security state, with all of its immense power and influence, works in slower and less direct ways. So it silences critics. It has an enormous army, and again, nothing illegal and not conspiratorial, has an enormous army of lawyers, politicians who they pay off, and people who ideologically do believe that the answer to our security is less freedom, more controls, and more secrets. Now, I would argue against that. I agree with you. It's, you know, and we have conservatives in the movie, we have independents, we have progressives. We try to cut across the spectrum because it's an issue that does cut across the spectrum.
You know, I was reading about you and your career online, and you've been hammered for having a leftist sort of viewpoint, at least in some of the projects and documentaries you've done. In this case, you really put it to Obama on the chin. I mean, you point out that he came in with this promise of the most transparent administration in history, and he has totally embraced this whole surveillance society and has cracked down on whistleblowers like no one else.
Yes, well, I think as we say in the film, and the great investigative reporters who participate in the film talk about the impact of the national security state of the CIA on the president. And that's, you know, this again, it's one of the awful side effects of a country that's perpetually at war, that's always involved in invasions, occupations, or drones. And with that comes a whole way of behaving in the world because all kinds of secrets are being kept. The national security state looks at 1.7 billion emails, as we say in the film. So one of the things we try to do with our films, whether it's this one or it's Walmart or it's the Koch brothers, we try to connect the dots so that people can understand in an interesting fashion how the system is working and how it affects each one of us. And I want to just make sure to let your listeners know that they're able to get free DVDs by going to our website because of a generous donor who wants people to be able to get the film and screen it and get it out.
Is that pretty much the only way that people can see it?
No, it's available. It's available on iTunes and Hulu and Netflix, all those places, Comcast, Warner's Cable. It actually will be in over 60 million homes. But for people who want to see it right away, and for people who are more inclined to take action, ordering a free DVD and then screen it. You know, show it to people, give it to your local library, give it to your church, or bring it to work.
Why do you suppose Obama sort of bought into this stuff? Why did he become so close to CIA and some of the other guys who call the shots?
Well, Unfortunately, and again, this is why it is a bipartisan issue, as you say, we've seen it with a variety of presidents, that the presidents come and go, and yet, unfortunately, what stays is a mindset, a national security state mindset. President Eisenhower called it the military-industrial complex. It goes way back to him. And it's gotten bigger and bigger and more powerful, and as a result, we find ourselves eternally at war. Enormous numbers of people killed, Americans and other countries, and then a terrible, terrible draining of our economy. I mean, just for a minute, think about the billions that have just gone into the Afghanistan war, what we could do with that money at home. It's incredible the changes we could make, or what we could do with that money in a positive way in other countries. I went to Afghanistan when we made our film about Afghanistan. I just recently got back from Pakistan because we're doing a film there about the drones. And you go to poverty-stricken countries, and it's so clear what a teeny little bit of money could do that would have far better effect for our security than invading, occupying, or droning people.
You make a distinction in the film, whistleblowers versus leaks. Can you explain it?
Yes. Leaking is what we see and what the big shots do all the time. They leak because they want to look good for the press. They leak because they want to get their side out. They leak because they have a book coming out. That seems to be acceptable, and they get off with it all the time. Whistleblowers are doing it because they believe, as Franz will be on the program later, will talk, and others have said, because they believe that they must stand up. They must speak out for the benefit of the country, not for the benefit of their narrow self-interest. They must speak up because it's a moral issue or a legal issue or lives are at stake or money's at stake, and they are the people we really should be celebrating, and it's truly tragic that many of them are being prosecuted instead of given parades down the main street of our cities.
As I watched it, and not to hammer this too much, but as I watched it, I was thinking to myself, again, this is something left and right could agree on, but I suspect that people who don't like Obama will look at it through that prism. Well, that's just Obama doing it, but they all do it to some extent.
Oh, no question. I mean, most of the cases started well before President Obama got into office. They started under Bush, and they've, maintained that through the different presidents. And the people who believe that our way to be secure is with a bigger national security state, more billions of dollars, and more suppression of our freedoms here and people abroad, will say, oh, no, whistleblowers should remain silent. We shouldn't allow them to speak out. But then I think that there's a huge majority of people who would say, no, this is not a way to keep us safer. And as Dana Priest in the film says, the national security state is like a self-licking ice cream cone. It only cares about itself. It's there, as Daniel Ellsberg says, to make sure it doesn't get embarrassed. That's not about protection. It's not about security. And it's damn well not about keeping us safer.
You make the point that the leaks happen all the time for whatever purposes the folks in power might have at a moment, and they don't have any kind of punishment. These folks who do it for good reasons, the little guys, get hammered relentlessly, and the what happens to their lives is absolutely horrendous.
Yes, I mean, just think about it for a minute. Franz Geil, who'll be on in a while, saved numerous lives. What did he get initially? He lost his job as a result of that. William Brennan, who's now running the CIA, was leaking constantly about the drones, even when it was classified. He winds up getting a promotion and a bigger job.
I had Thomas Drake on the program a few months ago. It was maybe the most compelling show that I've hosted in the time that I've been on this program. Extraordinary courage this guy had. An extraordinarily disturbing story about the kinds of things he went through and is still going through, still paying a price.
Yes, it's exactly true. He pays. I mean, each one of the four whistleblowers in the movie has paid a price, and that's why, again, it's important that people who care about the issues look. Everybody, it's a time when all too often people feel hopeless or helpless, and the reality is it is tough to make any kind of change. But the films that we do are meant to be tools so that people don't just have to get mad or, angry at the television or pissed off at something they see on the Internet. They can get one of the films, and this one particularly, because it's free and available now, they can then do something. Show it to 3 people or send it to your congressman and ask him or her to take a look at it, or bring it to your office, show it at lunchtime. All of those are ways that, as I like to say, there's a great line, I'm not sure who it comes from, which is democracy is not a spectator sport, meaning you don't sit on the sidelines. You got to get involved.
You look at the totality of these stories you tell. These are somewhat remarkable people, but very regular people also, and regular folks doing their job, raising their families, paying their taxes, loyal Americans who see a wrong, and then they all seem to realize what was at risk if they came forward. But somehow they dig up this extraordinary courage, they draw a line in the dirt, and they step over it and take this incredible risk knowing what was going to happen to them.
Yes, exactly right. And I think it's an important question. I was asking myself every day, what would I do? Would I have the courage to speak up and knowing what was involved? Would I have the courage to say, no, this is not right, and to do something about it? And that's one of the things that we want to encourage in our country, we not discourage, and we need more of rather than less of.
I wonder how many whistleblowers are out there who've gone through that and decided, I'm not going to come forward. I mean, it must be incredible, especially after they have seen what happened to the people you profile in your film.
Well, it's hard to know, but if you speak to the heroes from the film, I think each one of them, even having paid a price, would say they would do it again because they believed in the values, they believed in the Constitution, they believed in the things that we're proud of in our country, and that's really quite wonderful and quite amazing, and something that I hope the film celebrates, and that I hope your listeners will get an opportunity to look at, so they can say, yes, these people did wonderful things, I'm going to support them, and what is my line? Everybody has a line where they're forced at work at some point or other, not maybe about national security, but there's a line that we have to decide we won't cross. Well,
for them, for the ones that you talk about, they're basically considered traitors by their country, at least in the beginning. They're even prosecuted under the Espionage Act as if they're spies, as if they're revealing some national security secrets that hurt our country. I remember there was a quote from President Bush in the film where he blasted one of the whistleblowers in the New York Times for putting the story out as putting our country at risk, when in fact revealing the story made us safer.
That's exactly right. And we've had a few panel discussions around the country, and what often comes out in these discussions is just that point. Whistleblowers are saving lives. Keeping secrets are costing lives. And we see that happen over and over and over again. And I think that there have been attacks by vested interests, by elected politicians who are owned and controlled by the national security state, who are paid for by campaign contributions. But I think if you ask any sensible, rational people, as we were saying before, left, right, or center, they would say, I want more of these whistleblowers, not less. I want to know more about how my tax dollars are being spent and where they're going. I want to know more about if the government is breaking laws around wiretapping. And I want to know more about what is being done in the name of security that's genuine security versus either profiteering or creating silences.
It seems like so much of what goes on and that you profile is about money. It's not some interest in national security. It's about cashing in and making big bucks, selling stuff to the government, defense contracts, things of that sort, with little or no oversight.
Well, unfortunately and sadly, we've seen that over and over again. The profit motive has been brought into critical functions of government and military where it's never been before. There was actually a law, I think it was under FDR at one point, where he didn't want anybody to be able to make any profit off of war. And we're now at the opposite extreme, where so many war functions are being outsourced, privatized, and when you turn it over to even people with reasonable integrity, suddenly their whole way of measuring, their whole notion is skewed because they're in it, whether it's be war or contracting or providing services, they're suddenly in it for profit.
I look at, you mentioned some names in the beginning, sort of in passing. Karen Silkwood, who was, of course, slimed as being this promiscuous slut. Serpico, who got all kinds of grief for exposing corruption in the police department in New York. Jeff Wigand, who blew the whistle on big tobacco. Daniel Ellsberg even mentioned Galileo as being sort of the original whistleblower.
Yes, we tried to do that to give context, to just give people a quick reminder that there's a long tradition and the number of stories we wouldn't know about, things that have happened in our country that maybe, again, saved lives, raised questions about what our leaders were doing or not doing. Many of those things wouldn't have happened if people hadn't decided, I will not be silent. I will speak up, no matter the consequences.
When you look at how entrenched this national security apparatus is now, how it has grown since 9/11, how the NSA listening in on all these calls, the stuff that Tom Drake had revealed, are you optimistic? I mean, because I'm not. I don't see us getting rid of this.
Well, I try to be realistic as possible. I think it's an enormous challenge, but I do think that we're at a time where people have, for years now we've been sold the idea that the solution is more money and more wars. Anybody with a fundamental sense knows that's not making us more secure. And the fact that we have such a profound economic crisis at home, which is painful and awful, and people are paying with their homes and their savings and their ability to go to school, I think can help turn the corner where we will start to question what we've never questioned before. If I can't pay for a house, I can't retire, I can't have health care, why are we spending billions of dollars for weapons we don't need in countries that we're invading or occupying?
One of the most profound points you make is one that we've heard dating back to Nixon in the use of the national security excuse as a way to cover up evidence of crimes, outright crimes.
Right. Yes. Well, that's happened over and over again. It's happened with elected leaders. It's happened with, as we were saying before, private contractors, private companies that are focused on money. And that's all the reason that it is important for each and every one of us to raise as much hell as we can in whatever ways we can to protect that wonderful thing called democracy.
Well, I hope I can get some of your optimism. Tell the folks again how they should they can see the film and how they can obtain copies.
If they go to our website, waronwhistlblowers.com, you can just go right there, put your email address in or your address in, and you can get a free copy. And you can also, do it by going to any of our Facebook pages, or you can follow me on Twitter. It's Robert Greenwald, and we're constantly posting those things and offering those opportunities so people, again, most importantly, have ways to get involved and do something. It's not enough just to be angry and upset. We've got to turn that into action.
All right. Robert, thank you very much. Robert Greenwald, director of this amazing film, War on Whistleblowers. And one of the focuses of the stories that he tells in this film is that of our next guest, Franz Geil, who is a Marine who worked for the Defense Department, who exposed a terrible wrong that was literally killing people, killing our troops, and he paid a price for it. We're joined now by Franz Geil, who is one of the whistleblowers who is profiled in this film, War on Whistleblowers. Franz, welcome to the program.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I was very moved by your story, man. You've got guts. I'll tell you that. It's a courageous thing you did. I want to start by telling people a little bit about your background, because you were a civilian employee of the Defense Department when everything hit the fan. But you're not just a civilian; you're a Marine through and through, right?
Yes, sir. I've been a Marine pretty much my whole adult life. After dropping out of high school when I was young, I enlisted on my 17th birthday. Got out as a sergeant, then went to the university on GI Bill and came back as an officer about 1983, I think, and I'd retired as a major in 2002, and then was immediately rehired as a civil servant, as a civilian rather than a contractor, as a government employee, and as a science and technology advisor, and that's still the position that I have, fortunately, due to the help of a lot of other people, but that's the way it is.
You're not a pinko lefty rabble rouser burn the flag guy, right?
No, sir, I'm not. I'm a Marine. I love the Marine Corps. It's been my whole life, my whole identity, really. I think most, if not all, Marines would be able to identify with that. It's just who I am, and I've been as my whole adult life. Yeah, I guess you could call me a conservative, but I have some pretty broad ideas on various things. I hope I can't be pigeonholed. I don't think anyone wants to be pigeonholed.
But your loyalty, the Marines, your belief in Semper Fi is what gave you the impetus, the courage to step forward and blow the whistle on what you saw as a terrible wrong.
Well, that's why I love the Marines. That's why I made it. That's why I made it my career on active duty, and that's why I made it my career as a civil servant. Yes.
Tell us the story. What position were you in when you first noticed this problem, and what problem is it that you noticed?
Well, you know my short history, and my career was going along well in 2006, and I just graduated for the second time. Again, the Marine Corps sent me to grad school twice, and just graduated from the National Defense University, and went back to my post at the Pentagon as a science and technology advisor. This was in fall, late summer, early fall, 2006. It was a real bad time, I'd say, near the height of the insurgency in Iraq, particularly in the Al-Anbar province, where the Marines were operating out to the west. And so my job's at the Pentagon, but I got contacted by a prior commander, a boss I had at the Pentagon, who was now the senior Marine in Iraq, and he was leading the Marines. He was the commanding general of what's called the First Marine Expeditionary Force Forward, 1MEF Forward, in Al-Anbar province, and he asked me, and his staff asked me, whether I would like to volunteer to come over and serve as his science advisor, to look into some of the problems that they were having with acquisition, because there was a definite equipping problem. The Marines didn't have what they needed in certain areas, and they felt I had enough insight into acquisition processes, the processes back in the United States at Quantico, it's the support establishment, we tend to call it, back in the United States, and that I could help out. And so I immediately volunteered to go there and join them for up to 6 months was my plan. And much to the dismay of my family, because I gave them about a week's notice, and much to the dismay of my Pentagon supervisors, who their feeling was, well, my job is in the Pentagon. What business do I have going over to Iraq? That's not my job. And they also had an inkling that I might have some concerns that might cause some controversy when I went over there, and about the suspicions about the support establishment. And but my general, who was in Iraq, trumped them all. He went to a senior general in my chain of command back at the Pentagon, and I promptly flew over to join him in Iraq at Camp Fallujah. And while there, like I said, the insurgency was raging, and I was tasked with identifying needs and writing requirements, basically being a bureaucrat in a different location. But that's a very important job. Requirements of the Marines in the field need to be articulated so the support establishment can respond with the right equipment.
And one thing jumped out at you, right?
One thing jumped out. Now, there were many things that jumped out, but the one that jumped out, it probably was the most the tragic of all the deficiencies, was the armor deficiency. And the Marines were operating over there ever since we had gone over there and for Operation Iraqi Freedom, not just the Marines, but the Army as well. The primary utility vehicle for transporting troops around the battlefield were, of course, Humvees, high mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, which is the staple, the standard utility vehicle for the Department of Defense. All the services has been ever since the old Jeep was retired back in the 1980s, and that's a Cold War relic because it was designed for a different type of warfare, not an insurgency where you don't have front lines and a rear area. It wasn't designed to be a frontline vehicle facing the brunt of enemy weapons. But, since the end of the Cold War, that's the kind of conflicts we're facing in Iraq and Afghanistan and other areas that have proven that to be the case. And so a clever thinking enemy came up with very ingenious weapons, improvised explosive devices, which are called IEDs, to deal quite handily with these lightly armored utility vehicles. So the Humvees were no match for the IEDs that the enemy was using. And I mean, probably most of the listeners and yourself surely recall those days between 2004 through 2007, even into 2008, where the deaths and injuries and horrible maimings that were caused by IEDs against Humvees. I mean, it was just almost a daily report, and it was enraging. It was tragic. You would think we could do better. And so that's what I was confronted with. And the next thing I was confronted with was the fact that the Marines in combat had already requested a couple of years previously, had requested the ideal solution, which was a replacement vehicle, a big truck actually, called a mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle, that's tailor-made to deal with those explosive devices. And we call them MRAPs. And they've become pretty popular in the media, so the MRAP acronym is known. And they had requested these vehicles that were actually of a South African design, perhaps as far back as Rhodesia, when Rhodesia still existed. It's now Zimbabwe, but during the Bush Wars, as they're so called, of the apartheid period and pre that, when there was much unrest in South Africa, the children of the colonists, I will put it that way, developed some very clever vehicles to deal with bomb threats. And so, of course, they developed these things over the period of generations, actually, but as far back as the 1970s. And they were very successful. And they were commercialized vehicles. The models were being marketed all over the world. This was an easily available solution to this IED threat in Iraq. So the Marines knew about this in 2005, 2004, and the Army. There were several folks in the Army who were also aware of the effectiveness of this vehicle design.
So the Marines knew it.
Available.
The Marines knew it. The Army knew it. Hey, we're getting blown to pieces over here by the IED things, and the Humvees have a weakness. We need these other vehicles, and years go by and nothing happens, right?
Exactly. And the commanding general of the Marines at the time, in 2005, submitted a very blunt request and said, hey, look, we can't stand these casualties. We can't continue to have our Marines suffer from this being under-armored. He presented the problem, which was the vulnerable Humvee, and he presented the solution, actually named models of vehicles that were available for purchase to solve the problem. Well, anyways, these requests, we call them need statements, urgent need statements. This particular one had a monstrous implication from a fiscal standpoint, because obviously if you're going to buy these things that are not invented here, which effectively they weren't, they'd have to take money from something else. And so this was the impact when that statement, that document, arrived back at Quantico, had tremendous implications from a fiscal standpoint. It was probably the Marines over there asked for over 1,100 vehicles. And at that time, I don't know exactly what MRAPs cost today, but, it's probably close to $1 million a vehicle. You add in the logistics piece. It was probably between $1.5 and a $2 billion price tag for just this request that they had. Well, by the standards of some of the other services, that's still a big number. Air Force, Army, Navy, those are still big numbers. For the Marines, it's a huge number, even in the midst of the Iraq conflict.
Well, what price do you put on the hundreds of guys who are being killed and maimed? I mean, you could equate it that way. I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, obviously,
sir, you're not interrupting. I mean, that's exactly the point. You'd have to be almost schizophrenic as a Marine not to recognize the difference. One is you can't say priceless. I mean, there's always say, well, in war, no man, no woman is priceless. Well, geez Louise, I mean, there's a limit to these bean counting, as we call it, in terms of counting dollars. But in practice, yes, it is much more expensive to deal with, and not just from an intangible standpoint, from a tangible standpoint, the deaths and the maimings and the long-term care. It's much more expensive than the additional cost of the vehicles over the Humvee. So, well, anyways, the bottom line is that document disappeared. And, of course, disappear, I could explain for hours the technicalities on how that can be done, but it's actually quite simple in a bureaucracy to make something disappear. And as a consequence, and this is now we're jumping forward back to 2006, and I'm over there and I'm learning about all this. Much of this information is being brought to me by other officers. That 19-month delay had ensued at the height of the insurgency.
Jeez.
And those deaths and maimings, and I say maimings because some of the injuries were just so severe, and you see them in the news all the time. Amputations, horrible burns, traumatic brain injury, all the things that occurred from the survivors to the survivors alone. But all this stuff was unnecessary. It was preventable. There was a knowledge on the part of, I call it the bureaucracy. I'm not going to name names, even though names are known and positions are known, and who was in charge and who's this. All those things are known, but I'm just going to go ahead and treat it as the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy knowingly delayed the delivery of those vehicles, and that's the tragedy. And so, anyways, essentially,
Franz, let me ask you this. Have you ever calculated, ever looked up the statistics on how many American soldiers, Marines, Army were injured or killed in that 19-month period because of IEDs?
Well, I didn't, but someone else did. The Brookings Institution did. Jumping forward a little bit, and after I returned, a lot of things happened, and I can talk about that in a few minutes. But the main thing is that then Senator Biden and then Senator Bond. Senator Bond is now retired, and of course Senator Biden became the vice president. But both of those gentlemen, in a bipartisan fashion, picked up the mantle of concern for this issue amongst several, but this was the big one, in Congress in an effort to get funding for MRAPs in particular. And I guess the Brookings Institution, either at their request or independently, did some calculations. And I don't have the letter in front of me that was sent back to them, or their letter that those two senators then sent to the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Gates. But I believe over 600 to 650 Marines and soldiers had died during the period of delay, and then you can kind of make a rough calculation based on the averages of, okay, for every death in a Humvee or in a vehicle, you can make an assumption that 2, 3, 4 times that number perhaps injured, and that was sometime in there. The exact quantities are known, but the number of deaths was very well precisely calculated. So, yes, there is a document, a well-researched document to that effect. It could have been one, though. I mean, it could have been one and be no less tragic. And so it was, it was a business issue for me. It's my job. It's a profession. A civil servant. You got to bring these things up. No, it was a very emotional issue too.
Yeah.
But I had to be very cautious to back my claims or my disclosures up with facts. I had to stick to the facts.
And you had to follow procedure, right? You had to follow procedure. You had to follow the procedure, right? Sort of go up the chain of command with your concerns?
Well, yeah. Okay. That was okay. We'll jump ahead. About 5.5, 6 months later, I come back to the United States. And I had already raised a lot of hell while I was over there, right? I really had no conniptions about being, I would say, noisy about this issue. I'd already contacted the offices of members of Congress. I'd already contacted, certainly in direct discussions with the offices of the Secretary of Defense, both outside of my chain of command, certainly, and my chain of command while I was still in Iraq. And while I was in Iraq, I helped contribute. I don't want to take full credit for anything because I can't. I contributed to the acceleration of the MRAP delivery, and we increased the original request, which we had then uncovered. They had regenerated it, and then to about the same number, 1,100, and then I helped to increase that to several thousand. I think 3,400 before I left. So we got things rolling while I was in Iraq. But this was a problem. There was something seriously wrong here. First of all, I thought, in my mind, it was criminal that this has happened. I think in the minds of several others as well. But the main thing was, okay, forget about blame and all that stuff. We cannot allow this to happen again, right? We have to speed it up.
Franz Geil, I'm sorry to interrupt you at that point, but that music tells us we need to take a break. And when we come back, the story of where things went south for Franz, our guest, because he got in a whole lot of trouble for speaking out about this, the war on whistleblowers. Franz, you were telling us about these problems with Humvees, the weaknesses in that vehicle resulting in deaths and maimings and injuries, horrible injuries for Marines and soldiers. I remember reading the stories back then. At least for a time, they considered putting metal plates or something like that under the Humvees as an interim step. Is that right?
Yes, they did, sir. Now, if you'll just allow me one little statement, because I am a civil servant, I have to say that all of my views that I'm expressing here are my own, my personal views and recollections. They do not represent the Marine Corps or the Department of Defense. So I have to say that because they definitely don't concur with the establishment I work for. So, but I have to say that.
Okay.
But back to the armor. Yes, that is true. I would call it pretty much desperate and futile attempt to protect the Humvees that were so vulnerable, there were several efforts done. Two primary. One was to armor the Humvees that were already over there with plates and everything else. That's the one approach. And there was another approach is to, let's armor them in the factory and send them over as a new model called the M1114. So the idea that you could take the Humvee design and make it withstand the effects of these bombs. Well, unfortunately, the Humvee has some fundamental design features that can't overcome its vulnerability. One of them is a flat bottom to that vehicle that's low to the ground. There are many aluminum parts, which are, of course, bad. Under the worst of circumstances, aluminum burns, in fact. But also it reduces the weight, and the light weight is actually a vulnerability for the Humvee against bombs. And several other features that just made the Humvee essentially a death trap against IEDs. Another tragedy in this whole thing is that the Marine Corps and the Army knew very specifically from an after-action report that was widely distributed in 1994, as far back as 1994, that the Humvee was a death trap against mines and IEDs. And there was a general knowledge of, and they never made an effort to transition away from the Humvee. That's a tragedy in itself, because they knew from already conflicts in I think Bosnia and Somalia and other things that we have done in low intensity conflicts, that the Humvees, people in Humvees were helpless. So, anyways, they tried that in our new war, in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Yes, we tried to bolster up those Humvees, of course, futilely, because they were likewise destroyed by IDs. And so that is an accurate memory. And I remember the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, took some heat for that, for making the comment in Iraq that in response to a young soldier complaining about having to do that, taking scrap metal and making his Humvee stronger. And Mr. Rumsfeld made the comment, well, we go to war with the army that we have.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Here's the thing is, he was being entirely accurate. It wasn't his responsibility for the previous SecDefs that came before him. Who was in charge of those services back to 1994 when the facts were known? You do go to war with the Army you have, or the Marine Corps you have, and the tragic results we've seen. There's no way around it. You can't magically make things appear or make magic procurements with the snap of your fingers. It doesn't work that way. And so he was telling the absolute the facts the way they were. The fault lays in these bureaucracies who seem to operate off of a different set of incentives and a different set of priorities that are often distinct from the priorities of the Marines and soldiers in the field.
Tell me this, Franz. You mentioned about the cost. There was a reluctance to assume billions of dollars in extra spending to replace the Humvees, but is it also a factor that there's a contractor there that didn't want to lose the business that was exerting pressure?
Well, that's always the case. This is how the process works, and I'm not even gonna use the I would call it inflammatory terminology for that entity, that process. But President Eisenhower nailed it right on the head, and I'll let other people use the term. But in this support establishment back here in the rear in the United States where we prepare for war, there is a connection, an interconnectivity between the government bureaucracies and the contractors, and the whole system that ends up receiving money and then delivering the equipment. And that whole morass can become corrupted. And I think that's a fair word to use. I'm not saying, individual corruption. Okay, I'll grant that individuals, let's say, ideally, no corrupt individuals at all. Okay, I'll assume that. Because we're talking about Marines and soldiers, and even if they're retired. But the process is corrupted because the incentives and the priorities are not those of the immediate needs of the Marines and soldiers in the field. They are often the needs of the business processes and the business cases that are taking place in the rear. And, of course, there are major contractors that have great influence on how that process turns out.
I want to fast forward a little bit because I want to make sure we get to the full explanation of what happened to you. At some point, there's a line in the sand. You know that if you cross over it, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. What day was that, and what step was it that led to all the consequences that came?
Okay, I'll try to make it short because it was a pretty deliberate sequence. I come back from Iraq. My supervisors at the Pentagon are already kind of torqued off with me because I've raised so much consternation. I come back. I've been invited to brief the Office of the Secretary of Defense, one of his subordinate guys, on the problems. I create a draft brief. I'm permitted to do it initially. I create the draft brief, and I'm quite frank in it. I say, well, delays have been caused by the bureaucracy, and those delays led directly to casualties.
Oh, boy.
Well, Okay, so I circulated that draft around to all the impacted agencies back here in the rear, and of course they just were outraged. Marine, someone in the Marine Corps would actually take that kind of dirty laundry outside of the Marine Corps to the Office of the Secretary of Defense. I was immediately prohibited from giving the presentation. That was through the chain of command. So then at that point I said, okay, this is an emergency, because it was. There were actually lives being lost because of this intransience, I think that's the word, of the bureaucracy back here. And so I said, okay, I got to do something about this. I'm being prevented from my chain of command, going through my chain of command, so I took alternative routes. First thing I did, I sent unclassified stuff, of course, I want to be a good Marine. I'm not going to give classified material to anyone because that's not constructive. That's damaging. So I gave the unclassified materials that would tell the story to a particular reporter, Sharon Weinberger of Danger Room, Wired Danger Room, a blog online. She immediately published it. That was seen or read by the office of Senator Biden. I very shortly thereafter, within a day, got a call from Senator Biden's office, and I was asked by the staffer, a very supportive woman, on this, if I would talk to USA Today. I said absolutely, and I did a lot of this in plain sight. I don't. At this point, I really don't think so much about consequences. Solving the problem is important. USA Today calls the next day. Tom Vandenbroek interviews me. It becomes a front-page article that the Marines had delayed this need in USA Today, followed by several others. This was wonderful because I consider this gasoline. You got to throw gasoline on the issue. So now I think in terms of combined arms. I'm a Marine. That's what I do. And it's very effective, combined arms. Any Marine will tell you it works. So now I've got Congress and I've got the press feeding each other in a huge, ferocious bonfire, getting visibility on this issue. And sometimes you have to embarrass the bureaucracy into action. The whole idea is to move the bureaucracy, not just the Marines, but also the entire, maybe the Army as well, because they have a much bigger interest. Secretary Gates, who was already very much convinced that the MRAP is the right design, who's already formed up an MRAP task force, is now aware that the bureaucracies of the services are obstructing something that's one of his priorities. Suddenly, MRAP is all over the place. It becomes a top priority, procurement priority for the Department of Defense, et cetera, et cetera. It's been a good news story ever since. Okay? MRAPs flowed to Iraq. MRAPs have been flowing, or forms of them have been going to Afghanistan.
Because it got public attention, because it was no longer covered up.
It was no longer covered up. The need was now public knowledge. Now, and there were other issues too. Well, anyways, I continued my I call it advocacy, and I kept bringing out the problems. I continued to communicate with the officers and members of Congress. I even communicated in an email to General Petraeus at one point. He was still over in Iraq at that time on a different issue, which was of significance to him. And he even sent me a nice email back. He thought that was good, and he asked, well, what's the next steps on solving this? Little communication. Well, you can imagine, and this is outside of my chain of command. You can imagine how the stuff rolled downhill from there.
Oh,
right?
Boy. Yeah.
And so the things that followed in rapid succession. First, an official counseling, in writing and all that stuff from my supervisors. Then comes an official reprimand, I think for writing Petraeus in an email. Then comes the next one. I had visited Senator Bond's office again for I don't know how many times, and then I received a proposal for suspension. But then wonderful advocates came to my assistance. One was the Government Accountability Project, who have been providing me priceless legal services for free ever since that time in 2007. The Project on Government Oversight, POGO, wonderful advocates. They got me into the offices in Congress that I needed to see, people I hadn't seen yet. And then finally the Office of Special Counsel, a office within the Justice Department that takes care of people like me. And now under the leadership of a wonderful woman, Carolyn Lerner, just awesome. This re-energized office is doing a tremendous job. So I have advocates. Well, anyways, the stuff continues. And these advocates managed to stem my firing, which was going to be the ultimate outcome of this.
But in the interim, you're described, suddenly you go from a valuable guy, somebody they trusted, to a a guy who's not one of the top employees, a pretty crummy guy, right?
Oh, yeah. I get these things called personnel improvement programs. I got 2 of them, these PIPs. These are significant events in the life of a civil servant. I might have been just punching the clock and slugging around on the floor with a bottle of beer. I mean, that's what it would have seemed, to get one of those things. I'm evaluated as the bottom 3%. I'm a GS 15, and supposedly the equivalent of a full-bird colonel, right? But I'm being evaluated as the bottom 3% of all the employees against who I'm being evaluated, 2 years in a row. And it rolls downhill and downhill, and investigation after investigation. I got investigated first for suspected foreign contacts for a paper that I had done while I was at graduate school before I went to Iraq. Then I'm getting investigated for release of classified material, which first fortunately turned out to be incorrect. And then I was being investigated for psychological instability. Oh, there's a good one. That's one that always gets you. And then finally, was that final? I don't know. I had 4 of them altogether. These are all from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. And I got to tell you, NCIS, these are great guys. Just the same thing with the FBI, and who also became involved initially in the foreign contacts one. These are wonderful people. They're just doing their job. Many of them are ex-military themselves.
You figured you're going to be fired if not for the attention and the help of these advocate groups, but were you worried that you're going to go to jail or go to prison?
Anything's possible. Anything is possible if you enrage the bureaucracy just enough. Anything is possible.
These are powerful people. Powerful people. These are powerful people, and there's a lot of money behind it.
Yes, when you're in the executive branch, you're under a different sort of umbrella, and I think there have been many concerns about that expressed over the years, over several presidencies. This is not not just under President Obama, not just under President Bush, but going back maybe even prior to President Nixon, that the strength and what's called in the national security state in Robert Greenwald's film becomes thicker and more robust, and with more layers and alternatives with each successive presidency.
Describe for me, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but describe for me, we got to cut about 3 minutes before the break, what the effect of all of this is cumulatively on your family. I saw in the film an interview with your wife, and she was relieved at that point where she's interviewed, but you could tell it had taken a terrible toll.
It's been devastating. But the only reason it always takes 2. I consider myself a weak man, like anyone else, like any other man. And I cannot do this alone. And so many, I know whistleblowers in the past, marriages have failed. I've been so lucky. Conchita has been my backbone throughout this thing. And she's been with me from the very beginning. She knew from the start that our lives were going to change forever. And indeed they have. But if she wasn't there with me, I don't know if I would have had the fortitude to hold through. Maybe, maybe not. But it sure is an asset to have a wonderful spouse.
The threat that you might lose your security clearance, which was hanging over your head for a while, I guess, as detailed in the film, that's a pretty serious matter for a guy in your line of work. Oh, yeah. No, that would have ended it all. That would make me unemployable in anything related to the defense industry and possibly any governmental job at all, simply because, well, you lost the security clearance? Well, you don't need one here, but it does mean you're untrustworthy. You know what I'm saying, right? Yeah.
And so, yeah, that would have ended it. And I did get stripped of it for over a year, all my clearances. And they're still not entirely returned to me. That's a separate issue, but it's still something that hangs over my head. But for the most part, I'm doing okay now. But that's devastating for anyone who's involved with government.
Why is it that you were sort of forced upon them? I mean, who is primarily responsible for them having to take you back and give you your job?
Well, the advocates I mentioned, and another one, the Meritorious or the Merit Service Protection Board, a sort of a panel of judges who sits above the entire federal service system. They decided that the Marines had to revisit me. Also, the security officials in the background, who I also have great faith in being objective. One called the Department of the Navy Central Adjudication Facility. It's called DONCAF, and they oversee all Department of the Navy, Navy and Marine Corps clearance issues, civilians and military. And you can kind of, it's kind of like the Star Chamber. You know, these guys are in a dark room. You can see them sitting there. I mean, they're not in reality, but I'm sure that they're very trusted authorities to look at all of security issues and reliability issues dispassionately, and I truly believe that they do that. They've been considerate of me. I mean, I'm as much of a knucklehead as anybody, and so each one has to be every case has to be studied in isolation. But they looked at all the facts.
Franz, I'm going to ask you to hold on there. I'm sorry, but we have to take a break. And coming up, we'll be opening up the phone lines. I know the public wants to talk to you. You probably got some fellow Marines out there that want to say thanks, and we'll let them do that in just a moment. I should mention in this film, War on Whistleblowers, Franz's story is one of 4 very compelling tales. Michael DeCourt was an engineer for Lockheed who blew the whistle on a $24 billion boondoggle aimed at the Coast Guard that could have cost who knows how many lives. Thomas Tam was an attorney with the Department of Justice who blew the whistle on warrantless wiretaps and paid a terrible price. Tom Drake, we mentioned him. He was a guest of ours on the program a few months ago who told the world about the NSA's massive spying program. Very compelling stories. Franz, it's a small fraternity of whistleblowers at that level. Do you know those guys?
Oh yeah, I know them all so well. And one thing I want to say here, you know, I'm very, I feel very lucky that Mr. Greenwald chose to, you know, tell my story in this thing. But I can tell you, I feel a little guilty. Those guys, those 3 you just mentioned, suffered far worse as a consequence of coming forward with their truths than I did. I've been so lucky. Advocates, etc. You know, the Marine Corps is now in mediation with the Office of Special Counsel. I've still got a job. I'm still getting paid. Those guys got hammered, every one of them, and you can see it in the movie. And I mean, golly, they were gonna send Tom, you know, to prison for 35 years. In fact, at one point, it was even a possible life sentence for some of this stuff. It was nuts, and talk about an impact on personal lives and going after guys for just trying to do the right thing. They really suffered. And so in that sense, you got to understand on the scale of hardship, they suffered much worse than I did. I feel very, very lucky.
I mean, you literally saved thousands of lives. I can imagine what the response from your fellow Marines, fellow soldiers has been. I mean, I can't imagine you would ever buy another drink in your life if you went to a bar where Marines hung out. But did you get thanks? Did you get letters?
Well, I get things quietly in the background. But, you know, I'm persona non grata, and I will be for the remainder of my government career in many offices, commands, as long as the senior officers, some of them are still on active duty, who were either embarrassed or also senior civil servants, I must add, who were embarrassed by my disclosures. So, you know, if someone's going to express support for me, it's done very quietly and very personally. No, there's not a lot of drink buying going on.
No. Tell me.
Okay, I don't need that. That's not the point. The point is that together, I say we because no one does this alone. We collectively solve the problem. That's the main thing.
You fixed something in this case. But I wonder, looking at the bigger picture, the story told in the film, whether you are optimistic about our country's future when you look at the power of the military-industrial complex at the entrenchment of this national security state, this apparatus. Are you worried for your country?
Okay, I am again.
This
a Marine
is you. This is just your opinion. Right.
However, yes, I am concerned. There was a gentleman, a German, who wrote about this a good century ago, almost a century ago. His name was Oswald Spengler. he wrote a book, a dissertation called "The Decline of the West." You may recognize that. And he talked about the end state of democracies and the winter of civilization, or a civilization, a civilization cycle. And he talked about the democracies in this sense, and talked about the Caesarean end, where things become a little bit, can appear to be a little tyrannical. And I would never accuse any of our presidents of being such, but the system as such can start to behave that way. And I'll tell you, there's some compelling evidence that we may be heading into the winter of our civilization, our American civilization, as we evolve from what we thought was a democracy into something that looks much different. So, yeah, I worry about it. Is there something that can be done about it? I don't know. I take each day at a time, and I make the contributions that I can, as I know every other American does. And I think they are. But the process itself takes on sort of an organic life, and that national security state is essentially the outward manifestation of that process, that living process that Mr. Greenwald highlighted, and it is frightening because it doesn't reverse over time. No president gives up the substantial executive powers that have been acquired by their predecessors. Many campaign on promising to relinquish some of that power, but it really doesn't happen. It just grows over time. And so in terms of the balance of power within our government, it tends to shift towards the executive over time. And we've been watching that. And this is a progression that isn't reversed by one party or the other coming into power, because I believe that all the candidates and the presidents themselves had the best of intentions. But the organizations, the executive organization, and the power they inherit, it grows over time.
Well, you could argue, the argument could be made and has been made, there is only one political party. It's the money party. It's the corporate party that seems to call the shots no matter who's in there. We're going to go to the phone lines. We have a Sergeant First Class calling from Portland, Oregon. Doesn't want to use his name, but I'm looking forward to his comments. Thanks for calling in. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Sergeant. How you doing?
Just fine. Simplify, Mr. Franz.
Hey, thanks, Sergeant.
I got information coming from an Iraqi general. He stated that the Scud missiles that they sent and blew up over us had chemical weapons in them. He also stated that he loaded up chemical weapons and sent them to Syria in 747s, and he stated that the nuclear equipment was loaded up in 747s and sent to Iraq. I need the name of this Iraqi general. Do you know who he is? And do you know if this is factual information?
Sergeant, I do not. And I don't have any insight on the topic you're bringing up. And it's not because I know something that I can't talk about or something like that. I just don't know. I wouldn't know where to tell you to start, if you wanted to look into it. But I have no knowledge of that one.
Well,
so, Sergeant, have you been exposed to something?
I lost 4 individuals from heart attacks after the war, and 3 of the women, our nurses in our unit, came down with lupus. And I am sure that it is directly related to chemical weapons they were exposed to. Our chemical alarms were going off constantly while we were over there, and we were constantly told that there was no chemical attack, yet the missiles were going off over ahead of us. And I would like to know who this general is so that I could get this information from him. He was on a religious station with an interview with one of the famous people that's on this station that they have. And I really would like to get his name to see if he's still alive.
Well, I'll tell you what, Sergeant, if any of our listeners know that and want to send it in to me, we'll see if we can get that to you. Thanks for the call. East of the Rockies, Edward in Miami. Edward, what's on your mind?
Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
Okay.
I would just like to... Franz, are you still on active duty or no?
No, sir. I retired in 2002, so I'm now a civil servant. I'm a GS-15, but I still work for the Marine Corps.
Gotcha. So I can ask the real question I would like to ask. I'm a veteran, OEF veteran, I couldn't tell you how much I love America. I'm an Eagle Scout, and I tell you what, I'm scared like you gentlemen are. I don't know what the heck's going on. It's just, it's frightening. I don't want to say that word, but it's frightening to me. And, my wife thinks I'm crazy, but some of the stuff I try to tell her is, I don't know. I try to explain things to people I care about, but I don't think they really watch the news and listen to Coast like I do. But the thing I was going to ask was, what do you think about this litmus test of generals being asked, would they fire upon American citizens? What do you think, if that's a possibility, a probability? And do you think a lot of people would just resign their commissions over that type of a dilemma?
Well, George, is that one for me?
I think it is for you, but it might be a little.
I tell you, well, first of all, I could never speculate on what one individual or another would do. All I know is, you and I both know, from when we first came in, that we were always told, and I think you and I live it, that we should never feel compelled to obey an order or a directive that we know to be wrong or illegal. And so that's I go forward with this optimism that individuals will always act morally when they're in a pinch, especially if they're serving under oath. So I'm gonna go forward with an optimistic opinion on that. Do I know about what you were saying about generals? No, I really don't have any knowledge on that. But in the issue of the tying it to the issue the story that I was telling before is that I felt that there was that what was going on, the denial of needed equipment, and my insubordination, because I did probably violate orders and I was certainly insubordinate in doing what I did. It kind of goes back to that first thing that I was taught when I entered boot camp in 1974, is that never feel compelled to do something, to follow an order or to follow a directive that is wrong, and not speaking out would have been wrong. So in other words, and I don't consider myself any better or any different than anyone else. And so I optimistically believe that if anyone was standing in my shoes or in the shoes that you're talking about, different situation, that they'll do the right thing. I just want to remain positive and optimistic on those issues.
Thanks for the call, Edward. Tell me this, Franz. I mean, when you look at the kinds of things that Thomas Drake exposed, this massive spying program where the NSA is basically listening to everybody, why isn't the public outraged about this? Or Thomas Tam talking about these warrantless wiretaps. Where are people marching in the streets or screaming at their congressman or raising hell about this?
Well, okay. Again, and I'm speaking out of ignorance out of any of the specifics of these issues because I know nothing about them. Okay, but I'll say this: I think one of the things is, we want to believe that it's for the good. We have given up, even before all this electronic age, we gave up certain liberties, for the sake of public safety. And I think probably a lot of people say, well, it's a good thing too. Maybe we'll catch people by having all these new high-tech means of finding things out. So I think it's a balance of saying, well, there's some good in it, and then on the other side of the balance, you say, well, it can be abused. And so, but at the same time, the ability, the capability to do good or to abuse grows continuously. So there's a certain, I would call it, omnipotence that grows with the national security state. But is it bad? I mean, gosh, look at what's going on in the. Well, I won't talk about the specific issues, but in the electronic realm, the threats that do pose a threat from the outside or from the inside.
You know what? Though I don't want somebody listening to my phone calls. I don't want somebody tapping me into my emails without a warrant or without a justifiable cause or something. I just don't want it. I don't care what benefits there are.
Well, yeah, you know what? And I think that technology is on an accelerating path that may actually dismiss anyone's concerns about that. Technology itself, as the entity, the advancement of technology, may actually just overcome any objections to what you're talking about. I don't mean to sound sort of defeatist in that sense in the face of technology, but it's self-evident. It's becoming self-evident.
I think it's a good point. I think it's an excellent point. West of the Rockies, Deb in Fairfield, California. Hi, Deb.
Hey there, love. George, you really are the best coast host. I may be biased, but I'm also factual. This is such an important topic also. How we often in our household and in our neighborhood, we often talk about Bradley Manning and Julian Assange. And first of all, I mean, how can we actually help him as people in the United States? You know, how can we, you know, and maybe more to the point for this show, how do you feel about what Bradley Manning did and what the role that Julian Assange plays?
I'm going to guess that Franz thinks that Bradley Manning went too far.
Well, I guess, okay, let's look at it. I'll look at it as a Marine, as a Marine first. Okay, he's a young soldier, but he has the same rights as a Marine would coming in. And the basic right, we call it in the Marine Corps, it's called request mass. So in other words, the mechanism is given to us as uniformed soldiers and Marines to find. We have a mechanism to go through our chain of command very rapidly, even if we have the objections of the various layers of superiors above us. And I think in the Marine Corps, it takes us up to commanding general, maybe even higher. When I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1974, we were told that it took, in theory, it went all the way to the President of the United States. And it's a powerful tool, this request mass tool. And the Army has something identical. So every soldier knows that. And I'm sure Bradley, or young specialist, he knew this, as do others. So the my first reaction is, as you know, I'm Marine, wow, doggone, why didn't he use his request mass? You know, he should have done that. You know, he was wrong for doing all this stuff. Well, but you know what? Maybe he did. There's so many things we don't know about these things, and I realize this. I've heard again. I have no qualifications in this realm. You know, there's frustration that there's no transparency on that trust, but it's a military issue. You know, sometimes these military courts are close to are not transparent, and there's a reason for that, for national security reasons. So there's the one side. I guess I could look at it from that side, but then I want to balance it on the other. Okay, here's a young man. I'll try to put myself back in his shoes. When I was a Lance Corporal, you know, probably my favorite rank in the Marine Corps, if you can believe that, is you're young, you're idealistic, you wear your heart on your sleeve, and it's the idealism that really stands out in young Marines and young soldiers, because they're freshest. Their idealism is most sincere and most uncalculated. When they're shortly out of training and they're young like that. And he doesn't understand maybe process and procedures and law to the same extent that we do as we get old and calculating, right, in the senior ranks. Maybe he saw something that so offended his sense of right and wrong and of compassion, et cetera. I'm just speculating, you know, that he did something spontaneously, something impulsively unthinking. So then on this I say, well, what if that was me, or what if that was my son or my daughter? You know, they'd seen something that was just so enraging they reacted emotionally, or et cetera, et cetera. I'm just making it up, okay? I'm making up this scenario, but I'm saying there's another balance in there too. I have full faith in the system of courts, and et cetera, et cetera. It was very clear that young Bradley did something that was cut and dry, that was something that had to be brought forward for discussion within the military legal realm. I'm remaining optimistic that all of the human side and the legalistic side are both being measured in the court. I can't say anything else. Like I said, I have to trust that my military, that my government is going to balance things
Deb, thank you for that call. Franz, I'm sorry to interrupt because that was a very profound statement there. I really appreciate you coming on, and I salute you, sir, and thank you for your courage and for stepping forward, although it came with a price. We need more people like you. I hope you enjoyed your time here.
Hey, thanks a lot, George. I really did. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll look for a chance for you to come back. War on Whistleblowers is the name of the film, and you got to see it, folks. It's an important film. I want to thank all the listeners who've written in with the answer to a question that was asked in the last hour. The name of this general, this Iraqi general, is George or Georges Sada, S-A-D-A. He's the guy who wrote a book called Saddam's Secrets about weapons of mass destruction. So I hope that helps the caller who had those questions about exposure to possible chemicals or biological agents.